All right, everyone. I'm excited to introduce my next guest. If you were alive during the 90s, you know who this person is, the Snapple Lady. Oh my God.
Hello, Jeff.
Welcome to the show, Wendy Kaufman. Hey.
Nostalgia apparently is back.
I know people still love the Snapple Lady. We just spent a few minutes together. I can see where people just get sucked into your awesomeness, but like, it must be pretty cool. I mean, like, people still do though. Where's the Snapple Lady? I mean, I just went on TikTok just before. So many people just, I think, get so much warmth just from watching the old commercials, and they're
It's
all
so
out there.
funny
It's
because
amazing how many are out there.
I'm old, so I'm not a TikTok person. I'm barely even a Facebook person because there's so much social media out there. I'm not a Twitter person and I type with one finger. So, I fail, So it's very nice to know that people still think about me and that I'm sort of the nostalgia from the 90s. I love that.
You are. I mean, it was just like, you're like, who are you talking to? The Snapple Lady? And like, what?
Remember her? Listen, I have tremendously great stories to tell, which I'm sure we're going to get to everything. But it was such a gift for me in my life to be able to do what I love, which is to do nice things for people. And I just think, Jeff, that right now in the world, as we are so crazy and so divided, that it would be lovely to do a campaign again, much like the old Snapple commercials were, which were not political. They were just kind, with humanity being at its best and funniest.
I think it's time for Wendy to get onto TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. You know, as I started digging into all this, I know you've referred to yourself as the first reality star. I
I never did. It dawned on me
Well, that's
one
what I
day,
that's what I mean. Don. Yeah, I've heard you
like
talk
what
about it. Yeah.
we were like, it was sort of an accident because it was way before any of this stuff happened. And, getting 3,000 stamped letters a week was like a big deal. And I missed that boat, but I don't know if I could have taken that boat, because I was still so new into sobriety, which we'll talk about. I was probably the first influencer.
That's what I was gonna say. I think you're more akin to influencer, and the way that if these commercials were to play today, people would go, well, of course, they're just doing, like, comment responses. But this was mid 90s. That didn't exist at that point. So you were kind of doing now then. And so I think with the nostalgia bend, I think, kind of getting online and going, hey, here's the Snapple Lady, I think you could really play into that.
Yeah, you listen, you never know. I love people and I love doing nice things for people. I never expected, what was going to happen with technology or whatever. I was trying to find a way back to live because I had to get out of my head and do nice things for other people in my personal story. But it's such a thrill, seriously, for me to look and to see what might have happened. But what happened, happened. But what's so great about nostalgia is that maybe I'm going to live long enough to see that I get, a little bit of a shout out, for my place in history, which it was a piece of media history.
It definitely was. I want to dive deep into it. You kind of mentioned addiction and all that. As I kind of dove into your story, I was like, I didn't know any of this. So it was like, wow, you've overcome so much. And like, behind that smile, what you had kind of gone through before being the Snapple Lady was inspirational that you made it out of that. Can we talk about that a little bit, that
I would
story? And
love to, because if I can help just one person who tunes into your show, you know what? That's what I do. It's what I love. And if I could save anyone, I'm in there. Listen, I grew up in a really nice hometown. I grew up in Long Island, North Woodmere, home of all of the guys from the Wolves of Wall Street. I knew them all. I went to school with them all. Steve Madden back in the day, and then we had so those guys, before me was Peggy Lipton and Mickey Hart from the Grateful Dead. I mean, I could give you the whole, but I'm not going to waste your time. But also because we were right by Kennedy Airport, we had an enormous amount of the Italians who were coming in and they were working at Kennedy Airport, which has nothing to do with addiction. But I just wanted to sort of tell you, that I grew up in a really sort of crazy world of the Italian, like the guy before me in therapy. His name was De Benedetto. He was the head of the porn ring over in one of the families, and Gravano killed him, and he didn't make one of his appointments before me. So I knew he was dead as one of the first people because he missed his psychiatric appointment with the family. I mean, well, like crazy stuff. But you know what? It was a country club sort of, lifestyle. My parents were beautiful people. And while I am fabulous at my age now, and I've lost a lot of weight and, gotten much healthier through the years, my father was great. He had a weight problem in his childhood. My mother didn't really know what to do with me and how to handle me and was a little bit embarrassed about me with her country club scene. And I just sort of wanted to disappear. But in my disappearing act, I kept getting bigger and bigger, and it was very, very hard because I was probably the only daughter at the country club that never got put on a date or anything. And I just remember sitting in a taxi on my 25th birthday. My mother had gotten engaged at 19, married at 20. We did sort of what our mothers did back in the day. And I'm sitting in a taxi crying to my driver saying this didn't exactly work out the way that I was really hoping that it would. But I had a great life. I went to Syracuse. I did all sorts of great accomplishments, but I never felt good in my skin. And the night that I graduated college, I always drank through college and partied through college, did quaaludes through college, affordable stuff. But the night that I graduated Syracuse, I decided to try cocaine for the first time in my life because I did have a moral compass somewhat because I didn't want my father to have to pay for my drugs also. Anyhow, the night after I graduated, I knew it was going to be the end. I knew it was going to be a drug that I loved. And I did fall in love. And it did take about 10 years for me, to get to a really bad place from like 21 to 31. And by 31, I had an intervention with my family, and I'll answer all questions in between, where I literally got thrown out and had to go away.
Wow. 10 years of
Just
cocaine abuse?
bad self esteem. You know what? I would look in the mirror and I would always see the bad part of me. And you know what? It took me a lot of years, but I remember like it was yesterday, the moment after all of it, because my 28-day program in rehab turned into almost a year. Even that was problematic because I got thrown out of my long-term therapy, my therapeutic community after 10 months because they caught me gambling on the Kentucky Derby. So,
Did you win? Did
you
you win
just
the
can't gamble.
did you win on the race at
I
least?
didn't, but I remember the horse was Power Lunch.
Power lunch. During those 10 years, the intervention was that the first intervention or the final one that stuck?
It was the first and final because I was so sick at that point. I had gotten engaged to somebody who was a friend who I figured, what, maybe I'll get engaged and I'll have a baby and I'll be better and I won't be an addict anymore. But that changed. I realized, I wasn't that sick that I didn't know that I didn't love him and broke the engagement. Went through just so many crazy things. And I just remember towards the end, sitting on my couch one day, I literally had to blow my nose. And I reached for a tissue and I literally blew out the cartilage in my head. And instead of being afraid and nervous about such a horrific thing that happens to people, to me, it was like a badge of honor. It was something to be like very cool about. And I continued partying on, but I knew I was just getting sicker and sicker. And what happened is that I was a 3 pack a day smoker at that point. I was totally a coke addict. To take the edge off, I was having to drink. And when the drinking wasn't working because it just didn't go well in my stomach or whatever, I started having, and I had coke deliveries. I had a delivery service. Living in Manhattan, you find somebody for everything. They came over and would bring me pills, and I was taking pills. I didn't even know what I was taking. And I ended up not even knowing myself anymore, going to people's houses when I could get out of my house, because I was so addicted to Coke, I didn't want to leave anymore. So I started gambling. And like every weekend, I was like a shut in doing parlay sheets or whatever that I actually invested in a bookmaking operation because I was just that stoned. I didn't, like, I was just crazy in that time. Finally, I just realized, oh my God, I'm really in trouble. If I pressed my cheek, my nose would bleed. I was unrecognizable. And my parents and my brother and sister over at our family business, had an intervention for me one weekend. I had gone away to Boston to see if I could just go somewhere and not do drugs. And I couldn't even make it a weekend without doing drugs and finding somebody on Calm Avenue, and I didn't even know what I was buying. And I got on my knees that night and I begged God. And I wasn't even a God person at that point, but got on my knees and said, God, if you are here and you hear me, please, I beg of you, either to help me get better tonight or kill me tonight because I cannot go on like this anymore. And I ended up, having an intervention with my family on that Monday. And by Friday, the door locked behind me and it locked, in one of these mental facilities. And, I didn't know what the future held, but I'm so grateful for that moment in my life because it changed everything. My 28 days went to 45. They called me in. They said, you're going to die. And I had enough time at that point to really know what they were saying was true because I was not going to make it. If I wasn't doing coke, I would be doing something else. So anyhow, they sent me to a therapeutic community and there I ended up, with all of it for about 10 months until I got kicked out, from gambling on the Kentucky Derby. But I knew at that point, Jeff, just so you should know, that I was going to be okay because at that point, that 10 months, I was 31 years old. Too much of my life I had lost in my 20s, and I knew that I was going to be sober.
Wow. It's amazing. Well,
It's a fun way to start the
yeah.
interview.
I mean, it's amazing that you asked the universe for help, God, and delivered. Obviously, good things were right around the corner then for you once during
Who
this.
knew? I mean, that's a whole other thing
Right.
because when you think about it, Jeff, I was lucky because where I came from, the guys from Snapple lived around there. So I knew the kids, some of the kids. My best friend was Michael Greenberg, and Arnie, who was one of the founders. He was the one who really started with the juices. He had Greenberg's, which was on First Avenue in the Lower East Side, in a really, really shit part of town that nobody inhabited back in those days because it was all homeless people. Anyway, he was making juices and natural foods, and he had started Snapple with two of his friends that he knew since he was a kid. And the rule was you couldn't have friends or family in the business. And he knew that I got thrown out of my family business after the 10 months. And he just said to me, I want you to come work for me. And I said, there's not a chance that I'm coming to work for you because then I can't like ever curse you out again because then you're like my boss. because we had a very unusual friendship. He was my friend's father. Anyhow, he just said, just come. And then I turned him down a few times. And then he just said, you know what? Do me a favor. He's like, I'm really being serious. I have permission to take you in. I know that you are looking to do a sober job, and not me put you in with all this craziness. He goes, how about if I pay you $20,000 a year and start you in the order department where you'll learn what the flavors are, who the distributors are, who the people are in the organization, and then it's up to you. And I said, under those terms, you got it. You got yourself a deal. We shook on it, and it was unbelievable because within a year, I changed everything over there with customer relations. And they would laugh and say, we know you're doing something. We're not sure exactly what it is. But they sent me to take computer classes and to get things in order because people were writing to us. And, you'll talk to me about that. But like I became the head of public relations because I could publicly relate. And it was also such a great place to be, to do nice things for others, to get out of my head and have a real sober job.
It's amazing that he was there for you and kind of took that, I guess, that chance as well, just breaking the rules, but also, coming off 10 years and even 10 months of sobriety, of getting better. It's still a risk. You could have slid backwards, all that
They
kind of
put
yeah.
what you're saying is unbelievable. And to your point, they all knew, about the addiction and what was happening at the same time. We were doing a new national ad campaign, and everybody loved what I was doing with the letters. I can't tell you how many fights were happening in the office because the ad agency met me. They loved me. Jude Hammerly, who became my boss, because in the beginning, I was working for Arnie and I had to take a step back and we got a director of marketing. But they were all watching me on the phone and they said, she's crazy. She's hilarious. And they built this campaign based upon what my job was over there. They were like, you're going to put the fat drug addict girl on TV. And Arnie said, then what the hell are we paying all these people money to get their opinions? And if that's their opinion, let them have the opinion. And it was Arnie's job to do the advertising at that point. So, Jaime, he was doing contracts. Lenny was in charge of sales. And Arnie was in charge of marketing and the advertising piece of it. And they fought. And finally, I was going to be on TV. So now, what do you do next? You call your parents to tell them, oh, by the way, which is one of the great stories of my life because I call up my mother and I get her on the phone. And really, like I'm about a year sober now. I said, Ma, yeah, I just want to, get you on the phone to tell you that apparently I'm going to be the next star of the Snapple commercial campaign that they're going to do. And she starts screaming for my father to pick up the phone. And he answers. And she's like, our daughter is back on drugs. She's
You
like,
can't blame her. I mean, it does sound a little, right? It sounds a little delusional.
but that's how crazy it was. I said, I'm telling you the truth. She's like, where do you come off? You went to Syracuse. You were a film major. You're a fat girl from Long Island. It's not like you've ever taken an acting lesson. Where are you coming up with this? I said, it's a long story. You may not believe me now, but in a year from now, you're going to be at the premiere with me. And God totally came into my life. I totally got a God hit that night. And, and years later, I went into Arnie's office crying because I just couldn't even believe what had happened to me in my life. And he was my lucky star, and he looked at me and he got tears in his eyes and said, you know what? He goes, you did this. I didn't do this. I always believed in you, but you did this. and we just cried. He was amazing. He's in my heart every day. I'm so thankful for, and my life has been such a blessing. But it was not such a blessing, because I had to go through 5 corporate survivor issues down the road after they sold it. And, nobody wanted me in any of those companies, but I just hung in there and they fired me, and my people got really pissed off and stopped buying it. And they brought me back for a commercial. Then they just had me around making appearances. And by the time I landed in Plano, Texas, this Jewish chick from Long Island was going to get fired. But I made it for 18 years. That was the unbelievable thing. But my kids also grew up and they were doing VH1 and they were doing MTV and they were sticking me on shows. So they just couldn't get rid of me. I became truly a hemorrhoid in their asses.
Well, I mean, you're definitely a staple in pop culture history. I mean, that goes without saying. In the 10 years before the intervention, just to go back for 1 second, was your family aware of what was happening? Were you good at hiding it? Like, what took them 10 years to finally get behind an intervention to help you? Or did they try and you just weren't,
Well, they
having
were
it?
busy. We were living,
You were
by
busy.
that time, I'm living in the city. I'm
Okay.
not living with my parents anymore. So, I got an apartment right after Syracuse. My brother and sister knew, but they were partying with me part of the time. I was the one that really was the addict in the family. Jill and Alan both were not, but they saw what was happening to me and that I was rapidly declining in such a way that they really were starting to get worried. And then, of course, once they got worried, my parents got involved. But it took about 10 years to get to that point. They weren't looking for it. They didn't think, that I would be that person, but I was that person. So you just don't know, who anybody really is on the inside or really what's going on the inside, because you can make it look any way you want, but you could be dying on the inside.
Right.
But once they all came over to me, I mean, I was ready. It was over for me at that point. I just was in rehab that Friday. I just had to spend the week, to shut down my apartment and take care of business and, get mail moved or whatever, because I paid all my bills at that point, in the family business. But I was unrecognizable because this pains me to say, but my family trusted me. But you want to know something? I would go in my mother's wallet sometimes. I went into a vault, on my father's side of the picture. But what I learned from AA is that if you don't have to hurt people further, don't. Make it up to them in other ways. By the time I was with Quaker Oats, I got invited to the Super Bowl, and I was able to take my family to the Super Bowl, Super Bowl 30, which is how long ago we're talking. But you know what? I was able to, in so many ways, enhance their lives and do good by them without ever having to tell them that I became a thief also. Because and that's very hard for me to say, and it's part of the reason why it's all about doing good things for people and giving and giving and doing service and giving, because I can never forgive myself for how low I really went on the humanity chart.
Okay, so you find yourself now, to jump back where we were, like at Snapple, on the verge of kind of fulfilling this prophecy, this thing that you giving back to people and doing good for other people that you want to focus on. How did you find these letters? Like, when did you realize, like, oh, I get that mail was coming in, right? But like, how did you know, like, oh, this is a thing? And then not only just like, oh, I found one, but oh, this is a pattern. This is not a thing. This is a movement.
It's such a great story because, first of all, we were growing in leaps and bounds, and everybody was so busy with the mail that they were getting. So the mail that was coming to the company, I didn't realize was going to Arnie's son, who was my best friend at the time. But I have to say, I was in the throes of an addiction. And as much as I still love him today, he would call himself eccentric. I would call him an absolute lunatic. He was getting the mail and he was fighting with everybody. If somebody was trying to get something for free, he would write them back, you low life, all you're doing is trying to get something for free. He, in a secret moment, like showed me two letters that he was having like fights with these people. And in one of them, he was getting ready to put shit in an envelope and send it to them. I have never talked about this. So and I looked at him and I said, are you out of your mind? Like, what are you doing? These are people that are buying your brand and you're fighting with you're an insane person. And at that point made an announcement and said, any of the mail that doesn't belong to somebody is coming to me. It is never going to Michael Greenberg. Never. And I totally made that announcement. It will come to me. And from there, I saw what was coming in and what was being tossed out. But there are two things that you have to know about when those letters started to happen. When I was in rehab, I had a cousin who was much older than me, and he didn't even know me, but he knew, through the family, what kind of genes I'm made of and what my family was made of, and how we as a people, just survive. We do. What happened was, not even knowing me, he started to write to me once a week, telling me that I was going to be great, that I was going to beat this thing, and I became incredibly close. He's gone many, many years now because he would probably be 120. He was probably in his 80s when he was writing to me. It went so to my heart that somebody who was a stranger, really in my family, could take so much love and time to make me realize that I could be better. The second thing that happened was in my childhood, I had written a letter to Tiger Beat magazine because I wanted to win a date with Greg Brady, who I loved, Barry Williams. Nobody wrote me back. Somebody won the contest, but they didn't even say you lost the contest, You have a coupon for the next, and that always bothered me that they never wrote back to the people that literally sent them a letter to be in their contest. So anyway, those two things weighed not heavily, but was in my head. Oh my God. So anyhow, those two things, I remembered. And people were writing because they didn't have money and they wanted to have a birthday and have Snapple that they couldn't afford to have as much Snapple. And I realized, oh my God, like people are asking us to be part of the community. So let's start and be good community neighbors. And it started really from the neighbors to everything and anything. Like a college kid wrote to me and said that the only reason that he graduated from college was because he would stay up at night drinking Snapples. And that actually ends up being the first time I literally got on a plane to Las Cruces, New Mexico, to go to see this guy. I forgot, he was in Las Cruces. I had to fly into San Antonio or something, but I went to his graduation and I started to represent the brand in a different way, that they couldn't be there, the founders of Snapple, but there was somebody that was behind all of the people that loved us. And I started to do these trips and started to answer the letters and then went back to computer school so we could really create a department where we could answer the letters, not send a form letter. We had so many templates, but we answered your letter. And I had a monster on my hands because more and more I had a case of Snapple in my car and my car went on fire and I was able to put it out with the Snapple. So of course I sent him more cases of Snapple because he lost the first case and we just got involved in their lives. And it was an organic thing that just started to happen, but it happened. Like, we also had problems because, like, a piece of equipment, would by accident get in a bottle, but instead of making a whole big, oh my God, I would say, like Cracker Jacks, remember you got the prize? I would say, all right, you won the prize. Now you really won the prize. If you get a piece of machinery, I'm sending 10 cases to your house. Nobody sued us. Nobody had a problem with it. Everybody was happy. My bosses were ecstatic. And everybody went home happy because it was, it was kindness. It was fun. It was, whoops. You know what I'm saying? It was a different world.
That's
Did
and
I
you
answer?
you answered it and more actually. But it's amazing just that you kind of recognize this, but then the fact that you went there also, because this is pre-commercial, right? I mean, or was this after like you were just doing that as part of your job, right?
I was just doing it
Yeah.
and we got bought. The business part of the story that's happening at the same time, there's a guy by the name of Thomas Lee, who is a really famous at that time hedge fund guy. And he comes in and buys up 51% of our business and he wants to bring it public. So that's all happening on the other side of things. So they need a new ad agency and they need a new look and they need a new way to go national because really we're just a Northeast company. Now, what we did do that was incredibly smart, and these guys did it before me, was they hired Rush Limbaugh, who by the time we came out with the raspberry tea, he was nuts about Snapple. He loved the tea products. And by the time it was peach, he was an insane person and he wanted to do live reads for his commercials. So they went with Rush, and Rush was all over middle America, and everybody listened to Rush. So we got advertising that way. But what happened also is that we were also paying Dial a Mattress. And Dial a Mattress was one of the major advertisers on WNBC. And if you go back that long, you know that Howard Stern started on WNBC. And when we ended up leaving WNBC, Howard came to us and we decided to stay with Howard. And he became our other spokesperson on the other side who wanted to do live reads. We had it both ways. So, when everybody would get pissed at us for some reason or another, it's like if you don't want to listen to Howard because you're pissed at Howard, go listen to Rush. And if you don't like Rush, go listen to Howard. And then they were really smart because then I came into it. And then it became if you don't like either of them, we have Wendy and you can listen to Wendy.
Oh man, that's so at what point did they decide to make these actual commercials and sort of make you a TV star?
So I'm getting thousands of letters, and we get a new ad agency, and they're absolutely stoked because it's not even us. It's not even that we're going out and asking them, to send letters. These are really heartfelt, true confessions that are coming in, and they were untainted. Nobody knew what the campaign was going to be. The creatives from the ad agency started to go through all the letters and they saw a way to make them really, really funny. Like somebody wrote me, I swear in round one of the commercials, I love Snapple so much, I swear I am not lying. So they gave him a lie detector test, Dirk, and then there was always a twist, to everything. Snapple is the best thing that ever came out of New York. And we got Mayor Koch at the time to say, well, wait a minute, it's not the best thing, but it's a good thing. And then we got to star people in their own letters. So it became just a thrill. And then we had to be more careful because once the campaign came out by the second year, we didn't want people to be tainted by the letters of the first year because you could tell who was trying to be on TV. So we would take some of the most inane stuff, like Shane the Wonder Dog was the first year, telling us about how the dog loves Snapple. And every time they would say Snapple, the dog would come running. And the dog didn't move. And we got that footage, which was unbelievable, of the dog just sleeping. And it made it hilariously funny because they were so true to life. They were more careful the second year, and by the third year, they were even more careful. But we still were getting very untainted letters because we were still working our way through the country. By the time even I was done, the South, we really hadn't infiltrated the South the way that we wanted to. We were great on both coasts, but we were moving in to the center. Most of the stuff always came from California. We were the ones that came from New York to the West Coast and worked in.
I imagine from even before you started the campaign, you probably had enough letters. You could have gone years, right? How many commercials did they make? 30 some?
Oh my God. In the third year, I was getting 3,000 letters a week. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we had so many of them, but it's sort of fun. I know somewhere at my house in Massachusetts that I kept some of the letters that really made me laugh. I always wanted to do a book, but I just got really lazy with other things, and my book was like From Coke to Snapple, My Life in Ounces because of the weight, the drugs. And like I was just a walking party anyway. Like right now, it's just so funny that all of this nostalgia is happening because I'm working on a deal right now with a company, New Pavilion, to do the Wendy Snapple documentary. And I'm starting to look through everything, and I hope to have a really great film on Netflix one day soon.
I know people will line up to see that. I mean, what made it so amazing was just how unscripted and genuine the commercials and you were. Like, what was the impact for you? Like, no, so it's 19, what is it? These started like 93 to 95 ish or something like that. Like, what was it like going out in public, especially in New York?
Interesting, because,
Yeah.
I'm a regular person. And all of a sudden, I'm like this superstar at a certain point, even in New York. Like I was on buses, like they put me even on the label for the sport drink, Snap Up. Let's face it, at 230 pounds back in the day, it's not exactly like I was bus material, but that's what was so quirky and crazy about the whole thing. But what happened is that I lived on Broadway and 68th Street, and they had just built big movie theater, which was a Lowe's theater. It became an AMC with a big IMAX there. And I was a movie nut. I went to school to be a film major, although it was the most boring thing in the world. And I should have been TV radio. At least I learned how to be in front of the camera when I needed to be because I knew how to be in back of the camera. So the whole thing went circular. What happened is that people started to notice who I am. And I noticed when I would go to the movies, people were looking to see what I was buying to eat in the movies. So I realized, shit, I have to either come in late to all the movies when the lights are off. We thankfully were right in the beginning of cell phones, because what happens if people were taking pictures of it was right in the beginning. So I did it, in my estimation, perfectly. But people did carry, Polaroid cameras. People were always taking pictures, visiting New York. So I realized, okay, so my husband started to buy food and popcorn and Cokes for the movies. And then what happened was I would take the train from New York to Valley Stream, and on the train, my conductor all of a sudden went batshit and just said, "Oh my God, you are the one from the commercials." And it started out very, very slow. And I want you to know the first year was pretty quiet. By the second year, it was just everywhere. I remember going to the airport and I really needed security. I remember going to PNC to a concert one time. And at that point, I was doing my first celebrity fit club. They literally had to put security on me because there were so many people that were coming around between Snapple and Celebrity Fit Club. But, I was always nice. I always, talked but I couldn't put myself in any kind of dangerous situation. But it did get to a point later where my driver was armed. We did have some of that later because you just don't know how crazy somebody could be. And I do remember what scared me, and it was the first time it ever scared me because I was invited by Wayne Newton to come to one of his shows because his daughter Erin was an unbelievably big fan of mine. So I was invited with the family to sit with them while he did his show, and he introduced me, and I'm like, hello. And it was like a day I'll never forget. After that night, we got a letter from somebody who said that they were at the show in Vegas and that I kicked them, that I maliciously kicked them, and I knew that they were trying to sue Snapple because of me. And I had to go to Arnie and say, "Oh my God, I'm like I didn't ever think of this, but I became a moving target for lawsuits that people could just accuse me." But I was still filled with piss and vinegar because I knew that I was with the Newton family. And I wrote this person back and said, "You better be careful because I know what you're trolling for." And I said, "And I have no problem to meet you in court, because I was with his family and you don't know who I was sitting with, but they could vouch for me because I was with them the whole time. I'm not going to fall prey to having to pay off some troll, that's trying to sue Snapple." And then Snapple had to actually get insurance for me because I got terrified. Oh my God, so those were some of the interesting stories. Yeah, I've never talked about that. But then they were just really fun, where somebody would write me and be naked on a pier. Like I remember the guy is like in his underwear, like, with the shirtless, posing for me. Obviously he wanted to be in a commercial. And I sent him a t-shirt and shorts and said, please cover up. You might get a splinter up your ass that you'll be very unhappy about down the road. So, the irreverence was part of it also. But don't forget, we're with Rush, we're with Howard. And I figured, you know what? Well, let's throw in a little piss and vinegar with me because I was always like that anyway. And that's what Arnie loved about me.
I love that. It must have been scary being a target. You don't have to tell me when during this campaign, Snapple is making hundreds of millions of dollars. Did you get a raise from the 20,000 at any
Okay,
point?
so how it went, and I'm really going to tell you because I'm going to write about it one day anyway and talk about it. I started probably a few months for 20,000 until I just got my bearings and knew the flavors. By 3 months, I was already the head of public relations. I got on a chair downstairs and made myself the head of public relations because I could publicly relate. They raised me to 40 right away, doubled my salary. And then soon after that, I think they raised it again to about 60 or 75 because now I'm traveling and I'm doing, other things. In a year and a half, they really had to start paying me because now I had to be what is called Taft-Hartley into the union, into SAG and into AFTRA, as not to have to pay me for all the individual commercials that were running. There was a way to just pay me a certain amount. So at that point, and don't forget, I'm a female in a completely male world, which is a whole other part of the story with the glass ceiling. So in my best times back then, I was making about $250,000 a year. And then we got sold to Quaker Oats. And that, I was already now flirting with William Morris agency that wanted to do something with me. And I said, listen, you guys, I got the job. You didn't get me anything. I did this, but my salary is 250,000 a year. I said, this new company is coming in. Whatever you can negotiate and get me above and beyond, I will give you 5% of that. Okay. And then they got me a 2-year contract with Quaker Oats that was for $1 million. So they got me 250,000 more for each year. And then I started to make some money, but it wasn't for very long because then, I came up to the glass ceiling and then they started to take me off commercials and to just do appearances. They were always worried that I would behave badly, like they would behave, given a little bit of power. I was never a power person. I wanted to just do nice things for people. That was my thing. But they always treated me as grossly as they treated each other, these men in the ivory towers. And that's why, you know what, I would say to my father, my father was a businessman. He loved the stock market. I said, I got to tell you, I wouldn't invest a penny in Cadbury Schweppes. I said, actually in Quaker Oats. I said, I see what goes on over there in that tower. I take it back for the other companies, but it was Quaker. And I said, I'd rather put my money under a mattress than give it to these people. They don't even know what they're doing. And that was part of the problem because these guys were all Harvard, marketing people, and they wanted to make Snapple like Michael Jordan with Gatorade. And the difference between Snapple and Gatorade was me and Michael Jordan. And I said to them, the greatest thing that they would ever do, which never happened, which I still believe would have been the greatest commercial in the history of commercials, is me and Michael Jordan playing basketball.
That would be amazing.
You know what? It was the complete difference between the two brands. And I was for everybody, and that was like more of an elitist sort of drink. And it would have been one of the funniest, most written about, talked about commercials because we could be in the locker room together, talking, and I would be worried about my threesome with General Tso's chicken, and he could be doing Gatorade.
Oh, that's so funny. When you started getting all the success and money, like major money now. So now we're talking hundreds of thousands versus the 20. Did the temptations from the addictions start kind of creeping back? I mean, now you can afford to do anything you want. Was it like, did you have to go out of your way to kind of fight that back, or you were already way past that?
You want to know something? I was so filled with gratitude for everything that I had. You know what I'm saying? That it was never a temptation, and I would never hurt Arnie Greenberg, who really believed in me more than I believed in myself at that certain time. But I knew the value of what was important in life by that time. And I knew the value of memories. And, I had a friend I had many friends in the beginning that were all dying of HIV, because that was back in the day. And my home groups was just festered with all sorts of disease and fear and horrible things. And then in 2009, what I did do with the money, because I came from a family where my father's father lost his business and went bankrupt. So my father was always obsessed that he would always have enough for us. When you grow up like that, I used to get mad at him. When is enough already that you're fixated? So what I did is I always knew that real estate, was good. And I loved the Berkshires in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts and the mountains. So when I did get some extra money, I went and I bought a house in 2009 after I got fired for the last time, and that was from the Cadbury Dr. Pepper people. I was through so many, you have no idea. My house burnt down. I lost everything because I had everything in that house. I was still so filled with gratitude for the things that I did have. And while I lost possessions that had been given to me from people that were important in my life that had passed on, I still had the memories and I still had the most important parts of it, which were in my heart and in my soul. I've been there, I've had it, I've lost it, I've had it, I've lost some of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Now I just decided, because I'm retiring. And you know what? I made that money a long time ago, and I'm in a position now, that I have some money put away. I own my house in Las Vegas, but I am going to sell the Massachusetts house because I really would like, to have some extra play money. But I never had children, so I don't worry about that so much. But my husband had a son, and I do have grandchildren. So that weighs on me like that. You know what I'm saying? So I do save, but I do live. As I'm getting older and the world is getting so crazy, the travel is just not there the way that it was. And that was part of my decision to move from New York to Las Vegas, because at least I would get a different point of view and I could do really fun weekend trips out here now. But I will sell the Massachusetts house. And, I bought a great house. And of course, with the fire, which again was another God hit, which I really considered to be because we had a thunder and lightning storm up in Massachusetts, and the lightning hit a tree that was like 25 feet away from my house. The roots of the tree got electrocuted and hit my propane tank under the ground, which blew the stove out in my house. And the police came because my monitor went off that something moved in the house, and they didn't see that there was anything wrong. And it took 2 days, and the fire crept because it's a log lodge, and the fire just crept, and I lost everything in my house. I came home. I was ready for it. I had one tear come out, but there was no use to cry. It was gone. And you know what? And whatever was here was here. And that's life. You see, that is what life is. It's not easy. It's dirty sometimes. It's, God, I got to take a shower and get this off of me sometimes. And it's not easy. But you know what? You just got to roll with the punches. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to punch back.
Wendy, you're an inspiration. I mean, just go through what you went through to come out so strong, to just become a pop culture icon. I tell you, like I was looking at a video on YouTube. So these comments are from just the commercials, like a bunch of them. It was like, just people reflecting. This is just a year ago. These commercials are a great childhood memory. Wendy was the best. She was another person. She responded to my letter when I was a kid. I hope she is filthy rich now and lives in a mansion, have happily ever after.
Like how great, and how many people you have to realize, Jeff, how many people that I've met in my life that say to me, you wrote me back, you came to my school, you did this, you did that. It makes my heart so full because in my own dumb, crazy way, I really did have an impact on some people's lives. And that's, you know what? That's all you can strive to be. Now, I live here in Las Vegas. I'm very, very happy. It's a quieter kind of life. But again, I have more places to go that I want to see. I was stuck on the East Coast for so long. But you know what? Here it's a crazier place, Las Vegas, but I live 20 minutes from the strip. I'm in the mountains. I got my gun license. I said, I have all sorts of time. So now I'm like, a gun person, don't screw with me. Yeah,
Yeah.
this 5'1" chick will get in your face for, if she feels threatened. You know what? You can only do what you can do. But I go and I shoot sometimes, and sometimes I'm terrible, and sometimes I'm really good. Like I'm a sharpshooter. But it's a different kind of life. I feel safe, secure in a locked in community. And I didn't feel that way anymore in New York. I just, because I just moved here and, that's a great sadness for me. I just didn't feel that way anymore. And it started, I want to have a great retirement. And for all the kids, they spend so much money on taxes and so much money. And part of the whole thing is to live. So I just want to make my last years the best years. Let me tell you, my mother got sick suddenly and passed away at 73. My brother, God bless him, yesterday is the 5th year anniversary of his passing from lung cancer. He was 60. I'm going to be, like I was telling you before, I'm going to be 68 on this birthday. So, like the odds are not in my favor. I don't like what happened to most of my family like that, but some of them have longevity. So you live one day at a time and you make the best of it. And the quality of it counts. The quarters that you live in counts. I did New York during a great time in my life, and now it's a different chapter.
Well, you deserve all the happiness.
So
Sorry
come
for.
back to me. Come back after we get this book maybe published and we do this documentary. We're going to have to talk about that also.
Yeah, I would love that. There was an interesting thing. Saw this in two places. One, with the story you told earlier about writing to Tiger Beat for a date with Barry Williams. The myth of that is that you wrote to Barry Williams and Barry Williams didn't write you back. And that's what sparked your need to answer letters.
Well, I was pissed that Barry Williams didn't write me back because
Oh, yeah.
I wanted a date with him.
Okay. So,
So that myth is sort of real and sort of my fantasy. But I do want to tell you that years later, like all of a sudden, he gets sucked into the Snapple Lady's life. Like he's not doing anything. And then all of a sudden, it's like, woof. And there he is now on the Today Show with me, because I told him I never got really officially asked to the prom. And I was upset that I never was invited my best friend took me. And all of a sudden now I'm the Snapple Lady and I'm 32 and I'm 33. And I got 2 invitations to the prom and I went to both of them. One with the Today Show, but that was hilarious. And Barry Williams ended up coming on a show, a daytime talk show, Stephanie Miller. I was stunned and shocked out of my face. He came dressed to the nines in a suit, with like 3 dozen roses for me. And I couldn't even talk.
that's
I,
amazing. That's
I
amazing.
couldn't even, to have what I had. It's such a blessing. It's such a gift. I take none of it, like I tell you, for granted. Other than my addiction, there was no way that this life that I was meant for could have happened without it. So I'm so grateful for the addiction, and what that brought me. Some of my best friends in the world came from it. Want to just tell everybody, be the best that you can be. If you are in a bad place, there's so much help. Even to me, write me at askwendy at AOL.com. I still answer people's mail, or I'm on Facebook. You can find me there. I don't do the other things because otherwise I need to have my life. I'm so there. It's such a gift for me to help people. And even when I wasn't the Snapple Lady, I heard from a lot of people and I did tremendous things that nobody will ever know about it. It's about me, myself, and my God. I was able to do some really cool, great things, and I'm proud of what happened.
I'm glad that you made it through everything you made it through to live your amazing life and do so much good and bring happiness to everyone in the mid 90s. And then still decades later, people still warmly look back on you and that time. And I look forward to your documentary, everything. They teach they teach the whole Snapple commercial thing at Harvard Business School.
Yes, they do. And I have a whole paragraph, the meaning of Wendy, that's in there that they study because it was one of the worst things. And to your point, just so the Snapple brand was bought by Quaker Oats for $1.7 billion. The next people who bought it was the Cadbury brand, and they bought it for 300 million. And that's where the whole thing came in, the 1.4 billion, the 1.4 billion dollar error mistake. And it's a good thing for me, it's a terrible thing for them, but it's just ego. And if it's such a lesson, if it's not broke, you didn't have to fix it. You could have done other advertising, but I was tried and true, and I didn't need to be on every commercial. The gift to go out and to be their spokesperson would have been more than enough for me to do my life. And I just feel like I missed so much time because I still look at Snapple bottles and feel that they're my babies in a way. But you know what? They changed the whole brand. They changed the formulas. They took away so much of what we had that we are like 20% of what we were. You never know what's going to happen in the future. What I look at now is it used to be Dr. Pepper Snapple, and now it's Keurig Dr. Pepper. So Snapple even got tossed out of the name of the brand, and it's not even like a brand anymore. So maybe somebody else will come along and buy it for a cheaper price, and we could get back in there and get back to work.
Maybe you need to buy it.
I don't have that kind of money.
Well, we don't know. I mean, if it went from 1.7 billion to 300 million, it might be only a couple, it might be only 50 grand now.
maybe it'll be back to 300 million again.
Wendy, you're amazing. I thank you so much for spending all this time with me and sharing your story.
My pleasure. Anytime. You know where to find me. Don't be a stranger.
Wow.